Some of the toughest rules on polluting vehicles are being introduced in London today, and it's thought other major cities across Britain could follow suit. The capital's ultra-low emission zone means drivers of older, more polluting vehicles will pay a charge to enter the city centre in a bid to improve air quality. Well, Nick Dixon joins us live now from West London. Nick, are the drivers prepared for this?
Hi Sean, let's hope so, because this scheme is now in force 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're coming into central London, as soon as you see that sign, ultra low emission at all times, or indeed on the road itself, the congestion zone sign, when you're crossing that, you are effectively paying that penalty. Just as a rough guide, if it's a diesel car more than 4 years old or a petrol car pre-2006, you're going to have to pay that £12.50, and you need to get this right and make sure your car isn't exempt, because you'll have to pay a fine of £160. And these kind of schemes are going to be taking place in other parts of the country as well, the likes of Leeds and Birmingham, looking at similar schemes to try and encourage clean air zones.
Millions of us are living with air pollution in our daily lives, but now people using vehicles which emit the highest levels of nitrogen oxide from exhaust fumes will be paying a penalty. Air pollution is linked to around 40,000 premature deaths each year in the UK, and Public Health England says it can impact people suffering from asthma and cause the development of coronary heart disease, stroke and lung cancer. To try and combat rising pollution on London's roads, cars and motorbikes will be charged £12.50 a day if they don't meet emission standards, while lorries will be charged £100. Mayor of London, Sadiq says it could cut harmful emissions by 45%.
So the amount of money we're spending on air quality is more than double the amount of revenues we make from the ultra-low emission zone, but it's ring-fenced, Richard. We can't use this for anything else. It'll be used to improve public transport in London, but also to fix the air in London.
Campaigners argue it's a money-making exercise.
The profit that we're making from a truck is £3,000 a year, £26,000 a year in terms of potential charges. That's going to put businesses out of business.
Pollution is an issue across the nation, with the air in Doncaster and Leeds among the most toxic, and campaigners want to see ultra-low emission zones rolled out across the country. Nick Dixon, Good Morning Britain.
Well, as you saw there, we spoke to Sadiq Khan live here about an hour ago, and he made a fair fist of defending this new policy, but we've had nothing. I have to tell you, if you're watching Sadiq, we've had nothing but negative comments about it. We haven't had one positive comment saying this is a good thing. Everybody's saying basically it's a tax on the poor.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying it's a money-making scheme.
Yep. And how ironic for Labour, who told us to buy diesel cars a few years ago, and if you're stuck with them because you can't afford another one, you're having to pay huge amounts of money to come in to the centre of town. And this is going to roll out into other cities, isn't it, as a policy?
It is. But on the other hand, you know, we can't carry on just polluting our atmosphere around us, and it means that more people are in hospital as a consequence, so something's got to be done about it.
Now, if you've been watching, you will know that from today, motorists in London, and this is probably going to spread out across the country in major cities, are going to have to pay to drive older, more polluting vehicles into the centre of the capital.
It's the only city in the country to have an ultra-low emission zone so far, but similar schemes are planned in Birmingham and in Leeds. Well, earlier, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan told us he believes we're experiencing a public health emergency.
We've got children with permanent underdeveloped stunted lungs caused by the poor quality air, and adults with a whole range of health issues from asthma to dementia to cancer. It's the poorest Londoners living in the most deprived areas, owning the fewest cars, who suffer the worst air. But the problem is you can't see it, so you don't realise how bad that is.
Well, we're joined now by motoring journalist Quentin Wilson. Good morning, Quentin. Hiya.
Morning.
Sorry, just checking the satellite delay's working. Well, as I said earlier, we've had a lot of feedback from viewers on this, and we haven't had one single email yet. And I'm sure there must be people out there who agree with this, but if so, they haven't contacted us. There's a lot of anger there, and it seems to be kind of class-based. People are saying that this is a tax on the poor, this is a tax on the working people, and it's just not fair. But as Charlotte said, we've got to do something to clean the air up, haven't we?
So at Fair Fuel UK, we've had 3,000 emails this morning alone, and it's only 8:15. Yes, we absolutely have to clean up our urban air, but we have to do it in a rigorously scientific way that the 37 million drivers in this country believe will make a difference. Now, I look at the proposals here and I can drive into London in a brand new 5-litre V8 Mustang and not pay the congestion, the emissions charge. Yet a little motorbike 2007 will have to pay £12.50. I could drive into London in a 10-year-old Bentley or Rolls-Royce and not pay the charge. But if I drove in a 10-year-old diesel Fiesta, I'd have to pay. So we need to be very careful. This doesn't disadvantage the already disadvantaged and makes it a tax for the people who can least afford it to travel in London.
Quentin,
but it has to make a difference.
Yes, but Quentin, the point that I put to the Mayor an hour or so ago was that actually the devil is in the detail, and if they're going to get this thing sorted in terms of heavy pollution in the centre of cities, a kind of maybe a blunt approach is the only way that they're going to push this through.
Well, this is a tax to pollute, and you know, you drive in, you pay your money, so the most wealthy, the people who can afford it most, are favoured, and that's the problem. If you really want to improve it, let's not have cars at all. And there are other anomalies, like a Renault Clio diesel emits 20 times the pollutants of a Land Rover Discovery. And this is done on registrations, not on individual car types. Then you've got marine pollution, 20,000 ships coming into London ports. That's not even measured. And then the 450,000 aviation movements at Heathrow. Are we factoring those in as well?
Yeah.
Is it just passenger cars, or do we need to look at this huge raft of other pollutants like central heating, like wood burning, like industrial combustion, all this sort of stuff?
OK, look, Quentin, I mean, we know it's obviously not a perfect system. We know there are lots of other things that contribute to pollution as well. But when we look at the statistics, 4,000 Londoners hospitalised every year with asthma and lung conditions caused by pollution. Something does have to be done. And what other way is there of tackling it?
Something does have to be done, Charlotte, you're absolutely right, but it has to be done in a scientifically robust way. And there are all these gaps where we're not targeting other forms of pollution within London, and lots of pollution comes from Europe. We're not measuring that. So why just focus on passenger cars? Let's have a proper, robust study that's based empirically on science and not on kind of virtue signalling and gesturing. And the suspicion that people have about this at the moment is incredible. We polled 25,000 people at Fair Fuel, and 80% said that they didn't believe it's going to make any difference at all. And here is the really important thing. If we don't take consumers with us, we will lose them forever, and we won't be able to make a big difference to our air quality. And that will be the biggest tragedy of all.
Quentin, finally, and very briefly, if I may ask you to be, do you think that apart from being anti-pollution, what we're looking at here also is a cultural shift to a society which is anti-car, and that at some point in the relatively near future we'll have cities that simply don't allow cars in?
Well, that will come, and there is a huge anti-car rhetoric at the moment. But, Richard, what is the alternative? You go on the underground, and the particulate pollution on the underground is sometimes 30 times more than it is at street level. You know, we haven't spent the money on the infrastructure, the transport, the public transport. We don't have that. And expecting people to give up their cars now and jump on a public transport system that, frankly, doesn't exist is just dreaming.
OK, Ollie, Quentin, thank you very much.
From today, those driving diesel or older polluting cars and vans will be faced with a £12.50 charge if they drive into central London.
Now, you may have read this, but these charges are part of what's called the new ultra-low emissions zone, which the Mayor of London says should cut harmful emissions by about 45%, if they're lucky, and help prevent thousands and thousands of Londoners, particularly children, developing breathing difficulties or dying early every year as a result of toxic air.
Well, the Mayor of London, Sadiq, joins us now live from Westminster. Very good morning to you. There are accusations that this is actually just a money-making scheme, that the proof isn't in it, that it will cut emissions by the amount that you say it will do. There are concerns that it will hit poorer families the hardest because they won't be able to afford to upgrade their cars. And also, it's going to hit businesses massively at a time when there's already big uncertainty.
Well, good morning, Charlotte. Good morning, Richard. You've dealt with a number of points. Let me try and deal with each of those if I can, please. We've got in London and across the country in major cities a public health emergencies. As Richard said, thousands of premature deaths each year directly caused by the poor quality air. We've got children with permanent underdeveloped stunted lungs caused by the poor quality air, and adults with a whole range of health issues from asthma to dementia to cancer. 4 Londoners each day are hospitalised because of the poor quality air. The good news is that since we announced this policy 2 years ago, we've seen a drop in the numbers of non-compliant vehicles coming into the central London area because they've realised that because their vehicles are more polluting, they should either move to a compliant vehicle. We've seen an increase in the number of compliant vehicles, or if they can, walk, cycle, or use public transport. But the point is this, it's the poorest Londoners living in the most deprived areas, owning the fewest cars, who suffer the worst air. But the problem is you can't see it, so you don't realise how bad that is.
But Charlotte's right. She's right when she says that there are going to be people who will be disproportionately affected by this compared to others. Would it be fair to say that your approach and your team's approach on this, when you push this through, is a kind of a sledgehammer to crack a nut? You thought, well, there's no point dicking about here. What we've got to do is be absolutely blunt about it, and to make a change, rather than fiddling at the edges, we've got to think big. And if that means that some people suffer more than others, well, so be it, because the issues are so big. Would that be a fair assessment? It's kind of all or nothing.
Yes and no. What we've done is I've been lobbying the government to get some assistance to introduce a national diesel scrappage scheme to help small businesses, charities, low-income families move away from polluting vehicles to cleaner vehicles. They've said no. So I've introduced my own London diesel scrappage scheme. And what we do, Richard, is we're helping micro businesses. These are businesses that employ less than 10 people, charities and low-income families who, for one reason or another, can't afford to move away from a polluting vehicle. To assist them, we're also helping black taxis.
How do they access that? How do they get exemption then? What do they do?
So they contact Transport for London. There's a website and there's a grant scheme, roughly speaking, £6,000 to move away from a polluting vehicle. We're also helping black taxis move away from polluting diesel vehicles. And our buses, we now have in London, every single bus in the ULEZ area compliant, but 75% of the buses across London are now compliant. And similarly, Richard, we were keen not to have the NHS, the fire service, the police service disadvantaged, and so we've made arrangements with them as well so they can move away from the most polluting vehicles. And you're right, there is a massive human misery caused by poor quality air, but an economic cost as well. It costs the London economy £3.7 billion a year and the national economy £20 billion a year because of the poor quality air.
Sadiq, is this just one step on a long march to a kind of a carless capital, which other cities might follow? I'll give you an example of what I mean. I drove in this morning. I always drive myself into work, and not for the first time, I realised how much more difficult it is to get into the centre of London, let alone more expensive. A lot of roads closed now to traffic that never used to be closed. Obviously, you've got the 20-mile-an-hour zone, which when you're driving at 4 in the morning and the roads are completely empty, does feel a bit odd. But anyway, you have to follow the limit. But there are measures after measures after measures to discourage people from driving into the centre of the capital and, as I say, other cities who are following suit. If in 20 to 25 years' time we were in a position where no cars were allowed in the centre of London, would you be surprised? Is that actually the end game? Is that what we're really heading for?
I don't think this is anti-car. This is anti-polluting vehicles. They're not just cars, but vans, coaches, lorries, buses as well.
So electric cars would be all right then?
We are promoting compliant vehicles. So a compliant vehicle is a low-emission vehicle, an electric vehicle. That's why, over the course of the last 2 years, we've also introduced what's called rapid charging points. So someone like you at home can charge your vehicle overnight because you've got the luxury of having 8 hours off the road.
But I'm still using carbon fuel.
Absolutely
If I charge my electric car, I haven't got one, but if I charge my electric car, at some point down the chain, there's a power station sucking CO2 into the atmosphere so I can charge my car. So we're simply transferring the problem somewhere else, aren't we?
Yeah, so the grid's got to be renewable, but also even your braking disc in an electric vehicle, Richard, gives off some bad stuff in the air. So what we're trying to do is move people away from polluting vehicles, either to cleaner vehicles, compliant vehicles, or ideally to walk, cycle and use public transport. To give you an idea, in London, roughly speaking, today, 64% of people either walk, cycle, or use public transport. We want to get that to 80% over the course of the next few years. And the biggest reason for that is our population's growing. We're currently 8.9 million. We're going to soon get to 9 million. We'll be 10 million by 2030. We simply can't have 10 million people driving around London. We can have them going around London if public transport is cheaper, more affordable, more reliable, safe, but also it's easier to walk and cycle. And that's one of the things that we're grappling with as a city, that because of our success, there's more people coming. Nothing wrong with growth per se, but you've got to plan for that growth.